Our next session is hosted by HSBC Luxembourg, with the topic on financing the transition, banks as catalysts for a low-carbon economy. And we would like to welcome Emanuele Vignoli, Chief Executive Officer of HSBC. Welcome.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the invite. So the introduction have already been made. I'm Emanuele Vignoli, CEO for HSBC Bank here in Luxembourg, and 25 years experience in the banking sector, mainly in regional global roles out of London and other locations. And a year and a half ago, I moved to Luxembourg. I'm now very excited of being part of this highly sophisticated ecosystem. So the reason why I'm here, just a bit of background, not in Luxembourg, but here tonight, when I got a call from Isabel and Lux Flag about HSBC wanting to participate to this conference, my first thought was, I'll just call some of the subject matter experts from London, and they can talk about data points, science, and everything else. But I really think that as a CEO, the cultural shift is super important. So we really need to lead from the top. ESG and sustainability in general is something that I'm taking a personal interest. A few years ago, my knowledge was maybe 1 out of 10. It's increasing very fast, but it is important that this topic is really talked about at every level in the bank. And clearly, as a CEO, in the end, I will be the one responsible to implement our strategy. So that's why you've got me today rather than some experts. So in terms of the first slide, it's really to put into context HSBC here in Luxembourg. So just a few data points, but the key is we are almost 400 employees. We cover 4 different business lines, practically everything with the exception of retail banking. Why is it important? Because clearly we are not a systemic bank within the local market, but at the same time we are large enough to make an impact both locally and equally important to the implementation of our global strategy. So if we dive into the main presentation and the subject of today, I found some studies and analysis that I thought they were very insightful. A couple of research, one from the World Economic Forum and the other one for Deloitte. The message is very similar and clearly highlights that sustainability is really high up in everyone's agenda. So if you look at this first research from the World Economic Forum, you can see that now in the short term, 5 out of the main global risks are really related to sustainability and climate change. If you look back 2017, which is really not that far, there was only 1 in the list. So that gives you the context of the problem that we are facing. And if you look more to a medium and larger view, this is going to become bigger and bigger. So you're looking at 60–70% of the main issue really related to climate change. The next data points, they're kind of looking at it from another view, but it's very, very similar message. The Deloitte study, which I found very insightful, interviewed about 2,000 C-level individuals, about 24 across 24 countries for all large corporate with a $500 million plus turnover. So a very good population. And as you can see from the stats, 42% they put climate change as their top priority, only second to an economic outlook. So it's number 2. And if you look at the right side of the chart, it's talking about investment. And if you look at the people that are marginally or even more increase their investment, 75% of the company interviewed, which is a really large spectrum, have increased their investment in sustainability. The next data point, again, fairly similar, just to reinforce the message, and 97% of the people interviewed have confirmed that climate change and sustainability is going to be a key factor and impacting their future strategy and operation. So the big question for you as company, whatever you're running, is do you identify yourself with this fund? It's clearly, when I was reading these reports weeks and months ago, I was looking at what we're doing from an HSBC level, and actually it is pretty accurate. I'm talking obviously from my side and from our group perspective, for those of you that are familiar, but if not, it's pretty much published. We have a new global strategy which was launched approximately 2 years ago, and the 4 main pillars are digitize at scale, focus on our strength, energize for growth, and the 4th one is around net zero and the journey to net zero. So absolutely one of our top 4 priorities sits within this space. And as you will see from the rest of the presentation, the message around increased investment is something that, of course, is very close to what we are doing. So what is the role of banks? I mean, clearly, banks are large enough to have a real impact, particularly when you talk about global banks that operate across geography, which are clearly high risk. They operate in all sectors, so the role of banks is very, very important. And sometimes, of course, we'll face criticism, but I think it's important that we're out there. We don't sit on the back foot, but we need to face this head on, and the role of banks is very important. If you look at HSBC strategy and ESG ambition, it has been split in 4 different categories. The first is the net zero alignment. We have clearly signed up to the 2050 Paris Agreement. But what we have done to push ourselves a bit harder, we said for anything that is on balance sheet clients and our own operation, we are targeting 2030 to be fully compliant. So we have a much more aggressive time scale than the 2050. The second one, which I'll expand a bit later, is supporting our clients in the transition. I mean, this is clearly the one is obviously very sensitive. You still invest and fund companies that they are dealing in fossil fuel, but let's not forget that these are the companies that all of us have either used or worked for the past 40, 50 years. So what the bank has decided to do is to allocate between 750 billion to 1 trillion of our balance sheet, and that's sizable because our global balance sheet is 3 trillion. So this is really 1/3 of our balance sheet allocated against helping our clients to transition, so help them to invest in new technology. So lending and investment is going to be aimed to help our clients in the transition. Transformation, clearly we want to embed ESG across all of our business line, the way we onboard clients, and that's something that is work in progress, but there are clear rules that are now common and consistent across all of our markets. And the final one is really the capability build. Clearly, we are bankers. We are someone that we've been working with numbers and funds, investment clients for many years. We're not scientists, we're not experts, so it's important that we keep creating teams who are a lot more diverse, people that really understand the issue, that can advise us. And I think making decisions thinking that we know everything will be totally wrong. So we have hired some fantastic people that are helping us on this front, and we'll keep hiring and getting talent from different areas because we need to really grow a different type of skills. In terms of financing change, that links back. I want to spend a bit more time on the second point from the strategy, which is really financing change and help our clients to transition. I've got a couple of client examples. But the bottom line, our global scale, our heritage, our ability to work with large corporates who operate across 5 regions, 10+ countries, clearly can influence the way they operate. Our investment and lending strategy has to be linked to the client strategy to become a net zero by our standards. So what we've been doing, and I've got a couple of client examples. So I've called out a couple of examples, and then I'll give you some different numbers. So I did an interview a couple of weeks ago with a journalist, and it was quite challenging, and I thought he raised a couple of good points. When I shared this example, as you can see, the first one is about a UAE company. There is investing in sustainable agriculture, so basically they devise some new technology to keep the crops cool and wet in very hard conditions, so saving energy. And the second one is a Spanish company who's got a very advanced solar panel solution, and they needed funding to basically expand their presence across different markets and make sure that they could provide the more sustainable energy across the world. So if you've seen some of the data here, the journalists picked up, the investment for these two specific clients is pretty small. I mean, this one I think is, what was it, 2.5 million, the first one, and the second one was around 60 million. So when I was talking about the numbers before, with a 3 trillion balance sheet, clearly that's not that big. But I think this is important. First of all, you need a client consent, as you all know, to put something on a presentation. Secondly, I just wanted to showcase a couple of clients that are in totally different geographies, and they're operating in very different type of technology that will help the ESG agenda. But then the real data, which is all published and is something that we got targets and we're measured on them, is back to the data point that I mentioned before. So the the 750 billion to 1 trillion that we have allocated to this exercise, we have now deployed 210 billion. So 210 billion of the amount has already been utilized, and the split is, I think it's 185 on sustainable finance, 19 on sustainable investment, and 6 on sustainable infrastructure. So this is all data that is tracked, is published, and as you can see, those are two small examples of a much wider scale that we're operating in. And helping clients transition, and I keep repeating this, but to me it's a really important one. I mean, it's good corporate citizenship. It's a bit like if you are a teacher with a naughty boy or girl in the class, all you're doing is basically passing on to the next teacher. To me, it's not really doing your job. If we got a client that is committed to basically change their operating model, they're showing us a clear plan to transition in accordance to expected timelines, then I think it is our duty to help them. Clearly, if there are clients that they are totally against this and that don't give us enough collateral, enough evidence that they are committed to that, then it's a different story. There will be either a stop or an exit or a non-starter for new clients. But dialogue is essential. We can't hide behind the noise, the social media, the network. We do need to act, and acting sometimes means also making difficult decisions. Now, this is a little bit of a journey. I think it shows that this started in 2020. I probably covered most of the points there. The key parts is the one on the right. We clearly set targets for the 11 net zero banking alliance. So 8 of them, we've got targets for all of those sectors. And for the remaining ones, we're committed to publish them by February 2024. But as you can see, from 8 out of the 11, we're already publishing a report in progress, and clearly we have clients in all of these sectors. And the last kind of milestone here is February 2024. And if any of you is curious, you can follow the progress on our annual reports. And there is an ESG section, which is very detailed, and it tells you exactly where we are on each of these steps. So the title of the presentation was Bank as Catalyst of Change. I mean, clearly banks can't do this on their own. So it is very important. It's good to see this variety. I followed a little bit the conference over the past 2 days. I really like the variety of stakeholders, people involved in this, law firms, consultants, regulators later today. And this is really the essence. This is not a simple problem. It's not something that a bank can solve on their own or an individual can solve on their own, but it's really a collaborative and cooperation across law firms, banking sector, public, private sector, governments and regulators. And the dialogue has to be an open one, a constructive one, but we really need to pull together. That is something that, sometimes we can have a very strong and robust discussion with regulators, or some of the governments, but in the end, we are all aiming towards the same goal, and we can't do this on our own. Governments and regulators can use us in the same way as we can, but it's also important that they listen to us and that we work collaboratively towards the same goal. So this is a bit of a statement. I kind of covered it, but in terms of the final statement, global banks like ours have got the power of make a change when you operate in 62 markets and you have a strategy that is consistent across all of these markets. Many of those were, as I said before, they are pretty high risk from a carbon neutral perspective, then you can make a difference. I'm convinced of this, and we see the results. So it is really important that the message sticks. And clearly, when you have a strategy that is valid for other countries, then I'll close off before my final message with Luxembourg. I mean, Luxembourg, it doesn't deviate from what we're trying to do at group level. This is exactly the same. So if you look at what we're trying to do from a market perspective, we're really trying to embed sustainability within our business as usual, within our operating model. We talk about it every day. We have our offsites with sustainability expert. We have session and workshops with the clients, so that's something that we do constantly. The client onboarding process has been now fully aligned with the group one, which, as I said before, takes in consideration ESG criteria when it comes to investment and lending, so we're 100% aligned. From a business divisions perspective, as I said before, we have corporate banking, we have funds, security services, private banking, asset managers, and the rules are consistent for all of them. Their business targets, their strategy might be different, but when it comes to ESG, it's exactly the same, and we are responsible to deliver the same standards. Another thing that I found really quite exciting, last year, I don't know if some of you might remember, we launched the commercial banking division out of Luxembourg, which has been very, very successful. And our clients, I think the impact of that is substantial. We don't really deal with domestic companies here. Most of the clients that we're dealing with are subsidiaries of large international companies. So by having conversation with these large corporates that operate again in Asia, Middle East, and they want an entry point in Europe, and they chose Luxembourg, we can really have constructive discussion with them around their ESG agenda, and we can influence their plans. So it is a great way of interacting and understanding where they're going. And the final point I mentioned before, that we have, of course, also set out some targets for our own internal operation, which are more aggressive by 2030. So here our footprint, as I said, is not huge, but still we can make an impact. We moved to a building that is more ESG friendly. We have a car leasing scheme that now allows employees to only get either hybrid or electric cars. So whenever we can, we're also trying to make an impact within the local footprint, which obviously is important. So it's a combination of all these factors, and the biggest game changer is really our changes that we can work together with the clients, but any little step that we can do is going to make a difference. So before we move to a bit of a debate or question, which I'm looking forward to, I'll just close off with what I started. I think the most important thing here is the cultural awareness. You know, are we right on everything that we are doing? Of course, no. But I think the important thing is that banks, groups like HSBC, before me it was PwC, we talked about the subject. We make people aware, we share our plans, we commit to our plans, and we are judged by our plans. I mean, our ESG targets are now in the annual report. So the investors, as you can imagine, HSBC shares are quite valuable for those that have them. And if we don't meet ESG targets, then the value will go down. So this is not something that I put in a presentation and we can forget. These are our targets, which are now at the same level as our financial performance, our risk metrics, compliance, and so on. So this is tangible changes. But still, the most important one is the cultural awareness of this and making sure that the whole organization understand the values and what we're trying to do is the right thing. Thank you, and open to questions.
Thank you for the presentation, sir. My question is like, I agree that HSBC Bank can do a lot, and you're doing a lot already. So what is the biggest challenge or obstacle you are seeing to reach towards sustainability or in this area already?
I mean, the challenges are multiple, really. I think the biggest challenge is the client discussion. I think if you look at the most important one, that can make a difference, it is changing the way we operate with our clients. But if you think a bank like ours and a lot of other large banks on similar level, they've established an historic, sometimes we've got a relationship with a client for 20 plus years. So the infrastructure that I built, it's kind of geared, their business, their life, everything is kind of linked to what they've been doing for the past 40 years. So working with a client and making sure that they buy into the changes. And to be fair, the majority of the clients are now very supportive, but also help them. If someone has worked with a certain technology, which is obviously polluting the atmosphere for 40, 50 years, you can't just wake up overnight and implement something that is totally different. So in the same way as we need ESG experts, these clients, they will need engineers, they will need scientists, they will need people. So it's really that discussion that to me is the most exciting one, but it's the most challenging because there isn't an easy answer. A lot of these companies, they require time, effort, there will be impact on people. In the end, people are working in these companies, so they are real family, real lives. So we need to put that in consideration as well. So that's the biggest challenge to me, which is, but is the key differentiator as well. If we crack if we manage to turn around and commit what we have committed in terms of our balance sheet and clients, then I think it will really make a big impact on the carbon neutral. But that's probably the biggest challenge, I would say. On top of everything else, regulations are coming out, which we need to comply, but that's more governance. That's not something that I see as a challenge to me is BAU. That's something that we deal with if there's a change of legislation. We had Brexit. We had to change completely our legal structure in Europe. We have tension between one country and another. We will adapt to that. I mean, those to me are not challenges. A business as usual for a bank that operates in such a global scale. But in this specific case, I would say the relationship with the clients and how we can change them.
Hello, sir. I'm Farid from University of Luxembourg in the Sustainable Finance track. I have a question especially from your banks as HSBC. When I check in the ESG rating score, HSBC has especially in European continent, has a medium level ESG low risk. But when I see in the American continent, especially in Canada, they have negligible ESG rating risk, which is they have massive different ESG level between European and Canada. Especially in Canada, when I see the data, they in the 15th position between 1,000 companies from the ESG level. What it can be happen between, there is a big gap between American continent and European continent, and especially for the HSBC holdings in London, they have also medium level ESG risk, and for the HSBC European continent in France, they have also medium, but it's really different with HSBC USA and HSBC Canada. They have a negligible and a low risk ESG rating. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think there was someone else, when I came in, there was another presenter that was talking about the differences between the US and Europe particularly, and that is a fact. I think we're not on the same level playing field, but I think the difference, and I think I know the data that you're talking about, but I think the main difference is our internal consistency. So whilst, of course, we need to adapt to the various regulators. So if there are slightly different standards coming from the European ones versus the US, we need to operate within those value, and that's something that you can't really change. But our client onboarding process then have been made consistent across the board, and that's what I think, regardless of the jurisdiction, regardless of the regulations, that's where we can make the difference. So whilst the level might be different, medium, as you said, here versus low in the US, when it comes to client onboarding, lending and investment, ESG linked support, then is 100% consistent across all areas. So we're not going to lower the barrier when it comes to that. And that's what I think we can make. We can make a difference. Any last question?
I think we have no more questions.
No?
No?
Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emanuele.